Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Jael and Invictus Fleet Week is upon us once again. This year our special treat is we're going to have a tour of a serving Javelin class destroyer called the UEES War Hammer, as well as flybys from the first Bengal carrier in game, the UEES Barbary. Now you're going to see a lot of information on that tour of the Javelin and I'm sure you'll drink it in. But there's a few things that they don't tell you, a bit of lore that comes behind that story they're presenting, and I thought it'd be fun to go through some of those little points that you might miss and that they're not put into the forefront in this tour. And I'm going to do that while preparing the signature dish served in the mess hall of that very spaceship. See, the first captain of the Warhammer in 2832 was Captain Omar Singh, and he requested a special dish which has become to be known as Warhalwa. Different versions of halwa are found all across Asia, but carrot halwa or gaja halwa is particularly found in North India, where it's made with a seasonal type of red carrot.
I'm going to be making two different versions. The first is going to be as authentic, as decadent as I can make it. I can't get a hold of the seasonal red carrots that you'd actually make this with, so I'm using some rainbow carrots, which are nice good quality carrots. Those are going to be slow cooked in good quality whole fat milk. I've got dates, raisins and golden sultanas, cashews, pistachios and almonds, hand ground green cardamom, jaggery cane sugar and of course ghee. And I'm going to be calling this version Captain Singh's Warhalwa. But that's probably a bit unrealistic for what you can achieve with supplies aboard a serving UEEN vessel. So I'm also going to be making a version using more rudimentary or long life supplies. For this version I'm using tinned carrots, sweet condensed milk, raisins, cashews, pre-ground cardamom and ordinary butter. I'm calling this version Leading Starman Detmer's Warhalwa, and we'll meet him later in the tour. I'm going to put the steps that I'm using to cook at the bottom of the screen as we go through, and I'll start with Captain Singh's Warhalwa. But in the meantime, let's actually talk about some Star Citizen stuff. Let's start with the role of the Javelin in the UEE Navy. It was introduced in 2690, 9 years after first contact with the Vandal, during the imperatorship of Ilyana Mesa, the 6th Mesa Emperor. While it's the largest ship that players have been allowed to explore the interior of so far, as a destroyer class it's actually not that high in the pecking order. The largest ship in the UEEN is the Retribution, a unique super dreadnought, apparently followed by the Bengal carrier, which you can now see in game. But 4 other ship types have been mentioned that would probably sit between the Bengal and the Javelin in size. We've seen art for the Pegasus escort carrier, and we also have mention of battleships, cruisers and battlecruisers. If you want to read more about those ships, I've put some wiki article links to relevant pages in the video description. There's also another capital ship that we haven't seen called a light frigate. Who knows if that's going to turn up at some point. At least 3 other named Javelin class vessels have been shown to us so far. First, in the 2016 CitizenCon presentation, we saw the UEES Orpheus Horizon, a Javelin that was launched in 2781 and met its end crashing into Lear 3. The next year, Alpha 3.0 brought Daymar and the wreck of the UEES Fleiser, a vessel that went down with all hands in 2862 while trying to apprehend illegal miners. Not a great track record so far. Finally, the Javelin shown in the Squadron 42 trailer is the ship of Captain Rachel McLaren, played by Gillian Anderson, the UEES Gauntlet. And ship classes seem to share their name with the lead ship of the class, the first one produced, so we can say with some confidence that there was a UEES Javelin that would have been the first off the production line. Now you're probably noticing that most of these names have something to do with hand-to-hand weapons or combat. Javelin, Warhammer and Gauntlet are all probably familiar to you, and a Fleiser is a type of North African sword. Obviously Orpheus Horizon doesn't match that pattern, but if we take that into ships where we have them mentioned in lore but we don't know what kind of ships they are, we could also speculate that the UES Cestus, which was mentioned at last year's Invictus, and the Tomahawk mentioned in the Hornet brochure could both be Javelin class too. They actually match those descriptions. I don't want to rehash the tour of the Warhammer, but I want to point out a little Easter egg on one of the signs. The sign that tells us about Warhalwa mentions that in 2902, Lieutenant Con Timway credited his newly set naval accuracy record to the carrots in Warhalwa. This is actually a reference to 2 different things. Firstly, you probably know the story that World War II RAF pilot John Cat's Eyes Cunningham also credited his uncanny ability to shoot down planes to eating lots of carrots, while in fact this was a cover story for Britain's secret weapon, radar. Furthermore, The name of the lieutenant appears to be a reference to the late Tim Conway, rather than Con Timway, an actor with a long career, including as the voice of Barnacle Boy in SpongeBob SquarePants. Speaking of Warhalwa, our first batch is done, so we can place it up and get to work on leading Starman Detmer's Warhalwa while we talk about the crew. There's some quite interesting things going on with what the crew wears. First of all, the uniforms seem quite meaningfully redesigned since we last saw them in the Squadron 42 trailer, with simplified rank insignias, a new strap at the right shoulder, slight modifications around the neck, a changed insignia on the belt, and simplified textures overall. It seems all to be one flat texture rather than different materials. We can tell this is quite a recent change because some of the art in the convention centre shows the old designs, and those would have been reused from last year. In the past, there hasn't been a great deal of consistency between what rank people say they are in dialogue and what insignia they wear on their arm, and that trend kind of continues. Going off the old rank insignia series from Arena Commander, it would appear that the person who greets you onto the ship is a commander, and as this insignia is also worn by Sophia Kelly, XO of the Stanton, we might assume that he could be the XO, the second in command of the vessel. A notable change is that previously this rank insignia would have been on a gold uniform, while now it's on silver uniforms, which are the next step down. Lieutenant Commander Alderman will give you an interesting talk about the turrets of the Javelin, which are her responsibility as the gunnery captain. However, her rank insignias seem to mark her as only a lieutenant, the next rank down from what she says. Her speech, however, does tell us something very interesting about people of that rank aboard capital ships. Most of the lieutenant commanders mentioned in lore are the lead commanding officers of their own squadrons of fighters or other small ships, including Mark Hamill's character in Squadron 42, Lieutenant Commander Steve Colton. And now we see that rank will also put you in charge of the turrets on a Javelin. I think that's quite interesting to explore what are considered roles of equal responsibility across different parts of the Navy. The Lieutenant Horrigan in the mess hall appears to be wearing a casual work clothes rather than a service uniform, but these also seem to be somewhat redesigned from what we saw in the Squadron 42 vertical slice. And finally we come to what's probably going to be everyone's favourite character, leading Starman Detmer. At first, it's not clear what uniform he's wearing, but fellow citizen Astronut on Spectrum pointed out that it resembles one person in the Squadron 42 vertical slice who appears to be a gunner. Given the number of turrets on the Javelin, that could well be Detmer's role. The only other voiced part is a hologram in the briefing room, and we also never get to meet the ship's current captain, whose name is Metcalf. Finally, we can taste test our Warhalwas and see how we did.
Crewman Detmer's Warhalwa. It's nice, a little bit too sweet for me, but it still tastes like halwa. It still tastes like what it's meant to. It's all cooked together, it's blended together really nicely. While it's not going to be as good as the really nice stuff, definitely a good substitute using only really simple, cheap, tinned ingredients. Okay, so after about an hour and a half in the kitchen, about an hour of actual cooking, let's see if all that hard work paid off. Certainly not as appealing a colour, though versions I've had before have had false colouring in it. It's rich, it's creamy, it's just the right level of sweetness. And the sweetness is there isn't just a simple sort of, there's a nice richness to that sweetness, kind of like a molasses sweetness. Different nuts. And the fruit add so much texture. I like little bits of candy. That is very nice. That's my video. I hope you enjoyed the slightly weird format and learned a few little facts that will help your enjoyment of your tour of the UEES War Hammer. Until I see you next time, see you around the verse.